Good morning, honorable members.
Recording in progress.
And the team that supports the committee and the Department of Transport. Today's meeting is specifically to receive an update in terms of the policy changes that the department is introducing in terms of our rail system, and like as indicated, it will be led by the acting DG. Maybe formally just to request the committee secretary to present our apology, and we also welcome our content advisor who's attending our meeting for the first time. Welcome to the committee. I want to believe that honorable members will be quite looking forward to see your face. But before that, let's give the committee secretary to present the apologies.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. We do have two apologies. The first one is for the minister who's attending the cabinet meeting, and also Honorable Mama Rehane who's attending the finance committee. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Committee secretary, can you say hi to the committee members? Anneke Clark, our new content advisor.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the opportunity to say good morning to the committee members and our colleagues from the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Anneke. That's our new addition to our committee in terms of the position of content advisor. It has been a bit tough, but we were able to maneuver through what we have. So we will then, without any waste of time, allow the acting DG to lead the discussion. We have noted the apologies as presented. And that Makai Pa.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, and good morning to our honorable members. I've shared my presentation. I'm just trying to put it in the slide. Sure.
You have an hour to present.
Okay. Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning to honorable members, colleagues on the call. Like I've been introduced, Chair, my name is Mwakuma Kaipia. I'm the Acting Director General for the Department of Transport. Chair, our presentation that we have submitted to the Select Committee, it's the briefing in terms of the National Rail White Paper, which has been approved by Cabinet, which for us, it is a game changer in terms of the work that we'll be able to do, and at the same time provide policy certainty within the sector. And how do we then move forward, especially considering that the challenges that we have faced. In terms of our presentation, Chair, will highlight and talk to one, the policy process that we have undertaken. Secondly, the policy vision and mission will then cover at a high level what then becomes the policy thrust. We'll talk to the policy statements, which will cover issues both, which is a freight transport, and then secondly, the issue around passenger. And then lastly, we'll then talk to the implementation priorities. You will know, Chair, that the policy document itself, I think, is around 130 slides or so. So we have really tried at a high level to make sure that we then cover the issues at a high level. The process itself, in terms of the development of policy, it has been a process that has been started around 2014, 15, where we're looking at the critical element of how do we then make sure that there is a policy process for the country, where we had an analysis and research which emanated into a discussion document where we really talk to the sector and look at what are the key issues that we really need to pronounce on when we talk about the rail policy for the country. We then, at that particular time, it was under the leadership of Minister Dipo Peters, we managed to take a green paper to cabinet, which was approved as the first formal policy intention of rail, and how do we then deal with those issues of implementation. We then took that green paper, which was approved by cabinet. It formed the basis for the discussion as the vision. It identified really key issues that we really needed to deal with that. That led us to the development of a white paper process, where we then consulted with all stakeholders in the 9 provinces and those that were interested in the policy processes that we're pronouncing on. We then took that white paper draft policy that went through the policy, the ESET government process for implementation, and then finally it was approved in March 2022 by the cabinet of the country to really moving towards implementation. Then where we are in terms of that process is that you need the white paper basically to form part of the Rail Act moving forward to be able to implement some of the key policy consideration. As part of our APP moving forward, we have the National Rail Bill, which really seeks to then say, what are those elements within the rail policy that we cannot implement without legislative issues or emphasis, and we are really dealing in that process. So, Chair, at a high level, this timeline just shows you in black all the steps that we have already completed, and then lastly to then say, in terms of red is basically the issues that we are dealing with moving forward. It is the timeline really demonstrate that this was really a process that took almost from 2014 to 2022, almost a 10-year process in terms of that particular process. So it is a policy that might not be really perfect, but at a high level, Chair, it really took into consideration the inputs of the stakeholders across the length and the breadth of the country in terms of really moving forward. The vision of the policy is to re-emphasize and align itself towards the vision that we have in policy, which really talks to rail as an affordable, competitive and effective, reliable, safe, sustainable rail transport mode, which really becomes the backbone of South Africa's one freight logistics and passenger mobility system, so that is able to assist us to attain economic growth and social development by 2050 horizon, considering that this mode of transport becomes the backbone, and if it feeds to other mode of transport, we'll be able to achieve the growth that we want moving forward. And our mission really talks to what then becomes the enabling factors to be able to make sure that we're able to make that contribution. And I think in doing that, Chair, we obviously need to recognize where we have not really where we have missed our opportunities in terms of, one, the investment quantum that we were supposed to have made, where we have missed the commodity boom. And secondly, what then becomes the structural impediments, one in terms of the government machinery, but secondly in terms of our state-owned entities, which then becomes our implementing agent in terms of the policy elements, one being a freight, on the freight sector being transit freight rail, on the passenger rail being PRASA, because our element is that how do we then use these key elements, especially within the rail sector, to demonstrate and working together with the private sector to unlock some of the funding streams that we want to make sure that the sector comes on board. Because for us, it is not involvement of private sector, and we know people always question it. It's not privatization, it's really how do we use state entities to be able to work with this particular sector of the economy, because that's the sector that we serve, even with the product that we then deal with. If they are willing to bring money on the table, I think let's engage on that. But our view, and that's why we want the state entities to direct that, is that infrastructure remains one of the strategic assets that government needs to own. And that really talks to some of the policy positions that I'll talk to in terms of economic regulation and how do we then deal with that. Moving to the next slide, Chair, which really talks to the issue of what is the key policy thrust in the policy, which the department at the same time will be responding to in terms of the policy statement. At a high level, what we call the primary intervention is really the rail sector investment. To then say, as we pronounce on the rail policy, how do we then make sure that we revitalize our country's railways and establish what we call a high performance rail sector, so that we make sure that that rail friendly cargo that we know as a country that is supposed to be on rail, but is unfortunately on rail based on the challenges that we're able to close that back, because it's really through investment in rail that we can be able to do that. And in that way, we'll be able to contribute to reducing the transport, the greenhouse gas emission that we do, because we know that rail becomes a cleaner mode of transport. And this intervention, how we need to really implement it, is really through rail renaissance, because we know there are other market spaces that rail plays and can be able to achieve more than any other mode, which is really areas around high-speed rail, which is one of the pronouncements we are making, the issue of heavy haul, to be able to move to the heavier axle load, which is around 40 ton per axle load, the heavy intermodal, as well as the regional rapid transit. Because for us, that's the market space where we believe that rail. So any investment that we need to make, whether it's made by government or made by private sector, those are the market spaces that the policy pronounce on. When we then consulted actually on our green paper, our initial investment, our initial thrust was really on rail sector investment. But with engagement with stakeholders, we were able, stakeholders raised really issues around institutional repositioning and whether is the way our institutional structure as it is it really geared towards implementation of this engagement and the policy position that we want to put in. So as a caring and listening government, we're able to then really make sure that we take those inputs. And that's why now, as part of the final white paper, we have a secondary intervention called the institutional repositioning, which really doesn't, in a way, change. Yes. In a way that it doesn't change the primary intervention, but it then becomes complementary. And in freight, what we are pronouncing on is that we want to allow third-party access into our network. Honorable members will remember that initially, any operator who wants to operate within the rail space needs to make their submission to Transnet Freight Rail, who will then allow themselves to be able to implement and move their freight. And they'll only be able to move from their point of origin, which is their consolidating factor, or to the main line where Transnet will be able to take. So this policy pronouncement says that if an operator is willing to buy their own rolling stock, they can be able to move from their point of origin to that, obviously with submitting the access request through the infrastructure owner in this particular space, which is Transnet. So third-party train operators will be admitted to the national rail network, obviously in terms of commitment, because we then appreciate that in instances where they want to then upgrade the network in terms of those agreements, they'll be able to deal with that. And then there are a number of methodologies to be able to work that out, to reinvest them in the long run. Like I then said, that infrastructure must then remain into the ownership of government. The second element of institutional repositioning, it is really about passenger rail, where we believe that a concessioning of commuter or passenger line where buses are unable to offer services must be considered, and this must be offered to the private sector because there have been a number of operators who have knocked into the door of government saying, we want to assist, and we know with the current economic climate change, you are willing to then say, where there is space for them to operate, this is the kind of the policy implementation or pronouncement that we are making. And then moving into the policy statement, Chair, honorable members, then all the policy statements that I'll be presenting on will really be tying themselves, whether it's both, whether it's freight, whether it's passengers, in terms of the key policy thrust of the policy. So I thought it was very important that I spend a lot of time in explaining that, because for me, that is very critical for us to be able to deal with those particular issues. Moving to the next slide on my slide is just stuck, Chair. I'm trying to move that. Okay, thank you very much, Chair. And the next slide on policy statement really start with rail infrastructure planning, and what we are pronouncing as the department in government was saying, strategic rail planning, rail network planning and oversight. It's a centralized function that as the Department of Transport will want to undertake. Because for us, this is very critical, Chair, because previously state-owned entities used to plan on them own, and there was not really a clear national rail master plan that was really demonstrating how we want to deal with rail, which ones are the key priorities, which everyone wants to invest, must invest. But key to that analysis of the critical corridors, rail corridors, must be about what contribution are they making within the overall national transport task of the country. And how we want to deal with that, we will establish what you call a rail component. And these are the functions really that it will be able to deal with that, in addition to the rail component. They will develop and maintain high strategic vision for rail. Every 5 years, we'll develop a national rail master plan. This master plan, Chair and honorable members, it is really a Bible of an analysis based on data to identify the key corridors of where we want to invest, and then we'll be able to give that towards implementation. And then we'll take investment decision in terms of the detailed feasibility studies and analysis, and we'll be able to work together and produce a framework on how do we then deal with the funding and the kind of models that we want to implement in that regard. What we are doing, Chair, we are not actually taking the function of business operational planning from state entities. So in the next slide, what we are demonstrating is that we'll bring a broader plan, which is based on the net map that has been approved 2050. But this is really more making sure that we reinforce the rail chapter and really deal with the current challenges that we're having in terms of, but state entities themselves, they'll continue to do their own planning, and then obviously working with us as the department in line with the next framework. The next slide, Chair, and policy statement is really about track gauge, which is where we are pronouncing that the long-term strategic direction for the country is really standard gauge, because we understand that it is a superior gauge, and we need to make sure that in moving forward, one, aligning ourselves to the African Union resolution and to take our railways to the next level. That's what we need to implement. And I think what is important is to acknowledge that we have a current gauge that we are using, which is the Cape gauge, because really the issue there is around the 1065 in terms of the meters, millimeters, and then the other one, the meter gauge, and the other one is 965 in terms of the number. So, but the other one really makes sure that we can be able to play in the market spaces that I've talked to, including heavy haul and high speed intercity. So what we will then have to make sure is that how do we make sure that the two gauge coexist, and we're able to then sweat the asset of what we have currently. And what we are pronouncing on is that the Department of Transport will be responsible for the suit specification of this high performance rail network, comprising of both narrow and standard gauges. And obviously how we move and migrate, it will be dependent by the feasibility studies. And then we'll have to make that there is a justification for that, where it's possible to add loops and to make sure that the current gauge works. We'll do that. We'll look at the issues of interoperability, especially with our neighboring state within SADC. And like I said, this is really in line with the AU resolution of 2007. And for us, where we need to make sure that we are dealing with greenfield rail project, like for example, it has been implemented with Gautrain, we are able to do that. Basically, in the country, we have already the coexistence of both gauges, even though before policy. And in terms of these gauge issues, we believe that over the years we have been hollowed down in terms of the research, the technology, and we have lost a lot of skills. So we want to really revolutionalize the skills era, so that as part of this policy as the country, we're able to really achieve this level, and we'll be working with the universities to make sure that we lead that program together with the Department of Higher Education and the teachers, both in transport and in other spheres where these skills of rail, especially those that are in your scarce skills, and that we are able to deal with that. The next policy statements around issue of branch lines, which we know as the department that they were very critical to the revival of rural economies. I mean, if you go to various countries, part of the countries in provinces like your Northern Cape, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Free State, there have been dilapidation as part of those. So we believe that as part of this National Rail Master Plan that we are going to develop, the central planning component must really elevate that. There's work that we have already started doing that, because we believe it's not only the lines that must make business sense that must be subsidized, but those that are strategic and they're able to fit the criteria in terms of revival of rural economies and how they can be able to do the spin-off, and at the same time support some of the key sectors of the economy, including the agricultural field, the timber field, and those that want to use them. We believe that it is critical, and what we'll then do as a department, we will be able to develop a private sector participation framework aligned with this to ensure that any government entity that want to sponsor that will be able to fund that, and it will be prioritized with clear Excel load for them to be able to then transverse into the national rail network. The next policy statement, as part of our consultation, the issues that have been raised of in us really making sure that we implement the new gauge. How do we make sure that we don't exclude the colleagues in the rail, in the SADC, and secondly in Africa? Because one of the ambitions that we have as a country too is to make sure that we become a manufacturer of rolling stock, both in SADC and obviously going up in Africa. And the kind of even technologies that are putting and implementing in their programs really demonstrate towards movement towards standard gauge, so that we are able to compete in that space. So we'll make sure that we use technical solutions to ensure that there's connectivity within SADC, but at the same time, we want to lead within the African, the AU agenda items. Secondly, at SADC, that this migration to standard gauge becomes something that as Africa we will be able to embrace. But because if you look up there, there are already implementation of projects. Both I think is in Kenya, where other players in other continents are taking that space which is supposed to be able to do that. And there is an issue of African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and we want to make sure that as part of this policy instrument and pronouncement, we then play in that particular space. One of the key policy pronouncements we are making as part of the national rail policy is that how do we make sure that we use this rail policy as a pillar to build our local industry capacity, like I said, based over the years, because we have not been producing trains, we've been hollowed down. And I think one of the key program of government to really demonstrate the issue of localization, one is the Gibela partnership we have had with PRASA, where we're really building our own, we are building these trains here, but using local content in line with the DTIC. And how do we make sure that in building these trains or any other manufacturer of a train in the country, we then support industrialization, and even to make sure that we boost the local steel industry in line with the steel master plan to do that. And we have agreed that between ourselves and the DTIC, we will be able to then have a joint committee to deal with these issues, develop a strategy to make sure that we are able to then implement, and how do we then unlock the opportunities in that particular space and build ourselves a very strong rail sector network that will be able to contribute, one, to the economy of the country, and will be able to help us obviously solve broader government challenges aligned to the issue of economic transformation, economic development, and the issue of job creation. And part of localization is really to be able to deal with that. And then in terms of rolling stock, we are saying, pronouncing that state-owned companies will exploit the rolling stock manufacturing capacity in becoming the role supplier of rolling stock in South Africa, sorry, in Africa. And that's something that we are able to do that. One of the key elements that we are looking there is that we want to establish what we call private sector rolling stock leasing companies like your Avis of this world, so that even the junior miners and others who will want to come really and go and make sure that they get involved, there is companies that can lease, and even they can, even these train operators, they can, together with state-owned entities, they can lease against each other to make sure that the new entrants in the market are able to then benefit in terms of that. The next policy statement, Chair and honorable members, really talks to our issue around job creation, to then make sure that how do we make sure that we use the rail policy to make sure that it really is a contribution towards creation of those direct and indirect jobs within the rail sector. But secondly, how do we then ensure that between ourselves and the DTIC, we ensure that these highly specialized and important track construction are localized, so that construction projects in the country are able to balance that we create jobs within the sector. We have pronounced in the policy, Chair, that even though you are going to have all these policy statements I've talked about, whether it's rolling stock issues, infrastructure, what then becomes the enabling interventions to make sure that this policy works? And we have really captured that as part of the policy pronouncement. And I think high on the agenda is the issue around economic regulation, Chair. The NDP, in its analysis of regulators, have identified railways as a monopoly, as opposed to other sectors like your electricity and the telecommunication. And we have been asked at the rail sector to then say, to make sure that we bring transformation in this sector, economic regulation is one of the key elements that we need to deal with. So as part of the policy pronouncement, we have pronounced in the rail policy that we know, I'm sure members are aware that we have what we call Economic Regulation of Transport Bill, which has been passed by the National Assembly, now moving into the NCOP. But in this policy, because the bill talks to issues of economic regulation across the sector, but we have made sure that in the rail policy itself, we capture the policy principle that talks to rail. And we are pronouncing on what we call the interim rail economic regulatory capacity, which we have established to make sure that it works on the preparatory work, that once the TR is established, we are able to really plug into that, because other sectors in the transport sector, like your post regulation, they've already started working on the issue of economic regulation. So this is really a way of how do we make sure that we deal with the interim arrangement when we are moving into the next phase. The other enabling policy intervention is really about the rail safety regulation, which is the role that is played by the railway safety regulator in the country. But we are saying, in addition to what they've been established to deal with in terms of the Act, we believe there are additional responsibilities that they can be able to assist government with, one being the development of the rail rail risk metrics, because we know in terms of the state of safety report, that's where most of the challenges are. And we therefore say that they need to make sure that in other technology that they bring in, operators bring in the country, they're able to put clear specification of compliance that are able to really promote safety. And the last element that we are pronouncing on is for the railway safety regulator to play in the space of what we call regulation of and licensing of safety critical grades, because if honorable members can recall that the number of the board of inquiries that we have made have established human error as majority of the cause in terms of rail accidents, where you have drivers passing the red signals, and then we have accident. You have people who work in the safety critical areas, for example, in the rail space, who are not able to follow certain manuals, and the trains rolls, and you have this kind of. So we want those people to be licensed by the regulator, but it is very critical to do that, because now with bringing the private sector on board, you might have train drivers, for example, or the signaling people coming from other countries of the world. So how do we make sure that when they come here, they pass through some of our element to make sure that we are able to make sure that they are fit and proper to operate in our space. Another enabling factor that we have put there is really our pronouncement on the security management in the rail space, because honorable members will know that this is one of the issues that our honorable minister always says, and Achilles heels that really disturbs us in the rail sector in terms of how we move forward. The issue around security, theft, and vandalism. So we are making some a clear pronouncement on this element, that we believe that as the Department of Transport, we must be part and we must obtain a seat on the Critical Infrastructure Council, so that some of this infrastructure that we own is be able to be declared as strategic infrastructure and as national key points, so that it can be able to be treated as such. And we will develop and maintain a central security risk register in the space, and we are going to do that in line with the data that the railway safety regulator will deal with it. We are saying the DOT will again establish a specific coordination forum where SOEs and the county security agencies, including the National Police, will work together, share information, and all those kind of things. The work actually is already happening in that regard. So policy really just needs to confirm that. But again, you make sure that you are able to then do that within the broader policy framework that is there, and and really regulated. We will make sure that we continuously support development of research and in terms of managing these issues, because we know, and I think our emphasis is that we know that the challenges there is around the usage of copper and other substances. And how do we then make sure that we reduce that within our rail environment in terms of the implementation? Again, have other focus areas like your visual blocking, which is alternative technologies that we can be able to implement in that particular space. I think for us, it's very critical that we are able to do that. Moving to the next slide, which is really, but before I move to the next slide, I think one of the key elements that we want to pronounce on too is that we are already engaging with the Minister of Police to make sure that within the rail environment, there is strengthening of that partnership, especially in our fixed facilities like stations and everything, that we believe that it is critical for us to be able to have that. And at the same time, we believe that infrastructure managers, again, they must be able to put clear plans that they'll be able to implement. And one, obviously, our encouragement is that it must be a combination of one, physical security in terms of boots on the ground, but how do we then use technology moving forward to be able to engage in that particular space and make sure that we ensure our railways. That's the work that we are continuously doing as the Department of Transport, working together with Transnet and working together with PRASA, and we are even required, because we've elevated the matter towards the security cluster, working together with them and NICOG to continuously report on the kind of activities that we are doing. So it is a priority of the JCPS cluster, both at the DG's level and ministers level. Moving to the next slide, which is really a policy pronouncement around the skill development, because we believe this becomes an enabling factor for us to be able to implement those initiatives. I think the issue of skills becomes critical, and we are saying as the Department of Transport will take a stewardship of skills audit to track what are the challenges. We'll work with the sectors and the Department of Higher Education, and obviously making sure that we then make sure that critical skills are identified to be able to support the industry action plan of government. Moving to the next slide. Secretary, I don't know what's happening. I'm stuck. Somebody moved my slides. Can you allow me to move from my side? Or move to the next slide, which is slide number 22.
I thought you had the hosting rights.
Yes, it's stuck now. I don't know what's happening, Chair.
Okay.
Tried to.
Committee Secretary,
Okay.
can you help? Okay.
Moving now. Thank you. The next focus, like I said, Chair and honorable members, it will be really on the policy statement that seeks to provide institutional repositioning I've talked about on both the freight and the passenger side. And at a freight level, we are talking about our market and organization structure, where we are pronouncing that the market will be split into 3 distinct functions. So we'll have people who operate as infrastructure owners, who can just own infrastructure only, even though they are not going to operate. You'll have infrastructure managers who can manage infrastructure on behalf of any other person that is appointed. And lastly, you can have train operators who are just train operators but cannot do. So, or you can have a combination of those, for example, especially in the case of transit freight rail. But what we then pronounce on is that for that to work, you need to have a vertically integrated entity with a clear accounting separation, so that the accounts of both entities are not mixed, so that when government intervene and be able to deal with the issue of investment, they're able to know what are your base costs, what elements are going to form part of your access charges, and how we really need to move forward. And we This is an element of economic regulation where we are saying the transport economic regulator together with IREC, they will have to formulate and publish the proposal where if any other person, like I said, we're going to allow the third-party operators to operate in our rail network. It will be clear when they submit the applications in terms of how are they going to deal with that. And then in pronouncing on third-party access, we therefore, we are saying that any lines that we are going to have as part of our national network, whether it's a branch line, like I said, whether it's core, or whether it's shared, those will be subjected to third-party access, obviously to be managed by infrastructure managers. And as government will just make sure that the rules of the game are clear, and it's very clear in terms of how you want to deal with that. And those access fees and terms of will have to be published in the public domain, so that when people negotiate the operators negotiate the access charges and the access agreement, it's very clear. It's only when the one party will not be honoring that will be able to make sure that we have the economic regulator coming in to be able to deal with that. And I think as part of those agreement and implementation, it will be very important that we do an analysis of the capacity that we have in our rail network. And once you then do that, you can be able to say, publish a network statement, which then says, this is the kind of the network that I have. This is the kind of capacity that I have. These are the kind of access condition, so that people get into something that they know, that the terms and obviously conditions are clear. And we have put the issue of penalties now, because we've already continuously had complaints from PRASA, for example, to say, but our trains as passenger trains are then delayed, and the infrastructure manager has been transferred in this particular case, there's no penalty. So we are saying if there's an access agreement with clear terms and the other party doesn't really honor that, we must be able to invoke those particular elements. And in implementing this, the third-party access, we'll have the access forum, because operators and the permit holders have been complaining that they are not given space in that particular regard. The next policy statement is really about the intermodal logistics, where we are saying the policy itself cannot be in isolation. It must be able to work with other and obviously complement other modes of transport to ensure that we are able to then win this movement from road to rail with regard to feeder services, and at what leg do you then engage with truck, which then becomes part of a bigger planning of the work that we want to do with at the national rail planning component. With regard to funding, we believe that with the introduction of private sector funding and participation on board, that as government, we want to limit our funding contribution to rail infrastructure only, which is below your rail asset. That's your track and station and associated elements like your overhead, your track equipment, electric substation, and then operators themselves, they'll have to come with their own rolling stock. And we believe this to be a very big sector that I think it will create jobs in the country. It will make some economic spin-offs. And when we have launched the rail policy, there have been some of those who said, we are willing to work with government. We know where we want to contribute. Here is where we want to run our commodities, and we'll be working with them with that. And we will obviously ensure that there's additional funding from other sources to be able to make to implement access fees that will be charged to operators. We see as another funding stream that will fund the infrastructure managers' current expenditure, and one, it will continue in the current gauge, and it will obviously graduate as we move towards the standard gauge implementation. But on private sector, what we are pronouncing, Chair, honorable members, is that we need to make sure that when we allow third-party access, it can't be free for all. It must be within a clear framework that we are dealing with that. And as the Department of Transport, we are really already spearheading the development of the framework as part of our APP in terms of how we make sure that it is clear, crisp on how concession is going to work, what areas, what conditions, because even with state entities, when they implement that, they must be able to follow a particular framework. In terms of passenger rail, we have really reflected on the key elements of that, and we are saying through the central planning component, how to make sure that the urban transit, especially your low rail element like your monorail, in terms of your short distance and trams, are able to be implemented in that particular space. And then especially where it's feasible, that we're able to work with other spheres of government, chair, and moving forward. I hear there's some sound, chair. It's not me. I don't know where it comes from.
It's Mr. Dibakwane. At least he has muted. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, chair. So that's basically the issues on our passenger rail. And then moving to the next slide, really, chair, it talks to the issue around long distance rail and how do we then deal with that. It looks like I'm stuck again, chair.
Are you managing?
I don't know what's the challenge, chair. I'm trying to, it looks like, yes, chair, managing it has moved. Slide number 31 is really about the regional rapid transit, where we want to work with, obviously, the provincial government to then say, if there's areas where we want to deal with, how do we then obviously maximize that? And then the last, it will be on high-speed rail, where we already policies pronouncing that we'll develop a high-speed rail to make sure that we identify the key corridors in the country where we want to implement. And obviously down there, we are putting the criteria of how we need to feed in that. With regard to funding, which is funding on the passenger rail, we believe that passenger rail becomes a public good, and government must really continuously subsidize that element, considering that it is that mode of transport that is really used by majority of South Africans, especially when it works very well in our major cities. Talking to the future of rail, chair, and honorable members, we are really, as the department, pronouncing on this issue around the future of urban rail. We are saying at the high level, we must be able to investigate a number of options of how do we then revive rail and be able to move forward. And in this instance, we are talking about where the department will develop a devolution strategy, looking at various elements in line with the urban development framework, so that we are, and devolution, chair, just to put it in terms of context, is not taking the lines that PRASA are running and take them to municipalities. It really has various elements that can be implemented, which one, you can devolve the service standards, or you can devolve funding, you can devolve lock and stock and barrel, you can devolve operations. So there are a number of elements. So we don't want to come up front without seeing what are the issues on the ground. So we'll be dealing with this, with developing the development strategy. We already reached out to various metros who will be participating in this particular space. And you will see some of these elements that I'm saying will be developing that in the implementation framework. There's clear time frames of how we're going to deliver into that. So we're saying the next phase of urban repositioning for us will obviously happen when we've already dealt with that, including the planning, funding, procurement of operations, when the devolution strategy of the devolution of urban rail has been concluded and is approved. And obviously, moving forward, we don't, if metros wants to invest in other urban guided transit, like I said, light rail, automated light rail and monorail, which are not in the country, we are able to engage in that particular space through concession and the PP to be able to implement that. The next policy statement is really about passenger rail concession, which I've already talked to as one of the key policy thrusts, where in the PRASA space, where there's an opportunity, we must be able to make sure that we open that and implement. The next policy statement is a demonstration that the white paper on national rail policy support tourism, and we need to work with them, including together with the railway safety regulator, to ensure that they're able to get licensing, but even a fair tier regime in terms of access arrangement, considering that they are making a bigger contribution to the department and how we move forward. The next slide pronounced on universal design, that our initiative that we want to deal with in terms of the rail really adhere to the principle of universal design, so that the people with special needs are able to access that. And as the department, we already made a pronouncement in terms of the public transport strategy and how do we make sure that those elements, especially where government funds are implemented, and we are able to implement that. The next few slides is really about the implementation, Chair. And when we continuously consulted, we asked questions of whether are we going to immediately uproot the current gauge immediately. And we thought it would be very important that we, when we present, we are able to put that clarity that what we are trying to do as part of our National Rail Master Plan, we will prioritize our standard gauge implementation on major corridors. If we decide, for example, N3 is our critical corridor, we'll focus on that first. And then that will be informed really by the master plan. And where it's necessary, like I said, both the two gauges will coexist. And where we see our first engagement is really looking towards your high performance network. We look at eThekwini to Johannesburg, Cape Town, Nelson Mandela, Gauteng to Cape Town, because for us, at the end of the day, your network must be able to be a nice ring that able to connect and can be able to complement each other. And where we are sitting for now, heavy hauls will be treated separately, because we believe it is kind of a value chain where you want those communities to move from mine pit to port, which is the mine to the port, to be able to deal with our mining exports, and especially in our minerals. And we believe that must be treated as such. And if there are miners in terms of who are interested in that particular space, there can be concessions and agreements on how do they work with the infrastructure owners moving forward. Moving towards conclusion, Chair, we have made sure that the policy itself, in its implementation, we have categorized it into 3 horizons of implementation. We have given ourselves the first, the short-term objective to be implemented by 2014, and then we have medium-term objectives by 2030, and then we have the long-term objectives by 2050, which is aligned to the policy vision and mission that we have pronounced on. With regard to our short-term objective for 2024, is the National Rail Policy approved, which has already happened. We have the National Rail Bill enacted. I've already said it's part of our APP. Accounting separation of freight and Transnet freight operators completed. Transnet is already implementing on that. Third-party access commences. There is work happening already. Transnet has published their slots, and we're engaging with the sector based on the challenges that they have raised on how we need to deal with that. The issue of state-owned entities publishing their baseline network statement so that we're able to determine where the capacity, National Rail Master Plan being reinforced, and the diversion of research. So these are our short objectives implementation with a time horizon of 2024, Chair and honorable members, in terms of implementation. Moving to the next slide is really about the 2050, 2030 in terms of objectives, where local authorities will complete their planning of additional urban guided transit, working together with us, and how would we then implement the National Rail Master Plan, and obviously considering the time frame that rail a project takes, we believe by that time we'll have really finalized a business case for the first standard gauge pilot project, and then moving towards 2050, we'll be able to then implement, and we believe by that we'll be making major inroads because we've already started in terms of our implementation from road to rail. That, Chair, in a nutshell, and a high level, really, the policy pronouncement that we have made in terms of the white paper on national rail policy. We believe, Chair, like we said, is the first. We have a comprehensive white rail policy in the country. It might not be satisfying everyone, but we believe it's the right step in the right direction. If at a high level, we take the policy thrust based on implementation, on investment, and at a secondary level, the issue around social reform, we'll be able to move this country forward and revive our rail. Because with the research that we have done, one of the key elements that comes out in other jurisdictions is that investment-led railways, regardless of how strong the institutional framework it is, they become the basis of how you move goods in the country, and you are able to then respond to the economic challenges of the country. Thanks, Chair. I'll hand over back to you and for your guidance. And if honorable members wants to obviously engage with us, we'll be guided by you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Makaipa, for the presentation in terms of progress that the department is making in relation to the white paper on national rail policy. I will now open the floor for engagement by honorable members in terms of what you have presented now. I have noted the hand of Honorable Tim Pratasa. There's also on the charts, there's a question by Honorable Brenda Matebula. Kindly take note of that question on the chat. There's also the hand of Honorable Boshoff and then Honorable Mandla. Let's proceed in that fashion. Honorable Pratasa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Moyman. I appreciate the opportunity for the presentation. My first reflection, Chairperson, is that I'm very grateful. Partnership. I think that is really one of the way forward.
Team, I think my apology, Honorable Pratasa. I suspect your bandwidth could be a challenge. Maybe you can switch off the video so that at least it doesn't disrupt with your communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope that's a bit better.
It's very better now. Very good.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to show you that I was up and ready for work.
That's quite appreciated.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, Chairperson, I just was saying that I'm welcoming the approach to include the private sector very much in this plan. You will remember in the Northern Cape, we interacted with Transnet, and they very much said that railway line from down to Saldanha was very much going to be a private sector investment initiative, and I welcome that. So the question I want to ask around that is, I think there would be an agreement from the Department of Transport that across the industry there might be a shortage of skills, and I'm talking about engineering skills now, to get such an ambitious plan up and running. What is the plan of the department to obviously look in South Africa to see what skills we have, but where we are lacking in skills, in specific rail engineering skills? What is the department going to do to attract foreign talent where it's required? As many countries around the world do, there's no shame in doing it. How will we make it attractive for those people to come to South Africa and work with us and train up our folk here and, you know, lend their expertise? And then how are we going to deregulate such a process so that it's easy to get the right people to come and assist us with this very ambitious plan? And then in terms of public service partnerships, what level of, I don't want to use the term interference, but Chairperson, you know that sometimes governments can interfere. So when public entities come in and provide services, what level of interaction is there going to be from government side to not necessarily get in their way, but to actually allow them to do the job to the benefit of the people of our country? The other question relating to the public sector is, what level of interaction has there been so far with established companies in South Africa or around the world in terms of actually coming in to assist with the rail network? Is this just, I'm just trying to establish whether there's been any level of interaction or whether this is just complete blue sky. I understand that the 2050 plan is largely blue sky, I understand that, but what level of interaction has there been? So that's all around the public-private partnership issue. Then the other theme I want to focus on is on page 10 and page 34 of the presentation, there's reference to interaction with municipal authorities. Now, I'm just painfully aware of the fact that many municipalities have nowhere near the kind of money they need just to run their normal day-to-day operations. So will the municipalities be funded to maintain sidings and railway infrastructure? Will they be funded? And then how will that work? If we can just get clarity on that. And then also, there's a big confusion always in municipality between who owns the land. When we have an abandoned railway, which I'm quite sure is not just a Durban phenomena, I'm sure it's right around the country, where vagrants and criminals use the area that's completely overgrown, there are health concerns. There's always this issue of Transnet owns it or Transport owns it. And I think that this blue sky plan, I was really hoping to see that there would be a very strong emphasis on, right, let's bring Transnet and Transport together finally and actually amalgamate Transnet into Transport. Because I still believe, and you know, I raise this often, Chair, Transnet's got to be part of Transport because we've got two silos there and it's a massive problem. In the port of Durban, the reason why we have such a problem with trucks is because only 20% of freight is moving out of Durban on rail, and that's Transnet owned. There's got to be more of a consolidation of the Transnet and the Transport function, so that they work in one direction and not in silos. That is really the major problem. So I would just like to get comment on what sort of interaction is going to be between Transport and Transnet, and also responsibility for corridors owned by Transnet and Transport. Who will municipalities be able to deal with in that, in terms of this new plan? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Bratiseth, Honorable Bashop.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to all. I'm also in Acacia Park, so I'm not going to switch on my video. Honorable Bratiseth has touched on practically everything, so I'm going to keep mine short. With regard to the implementation plan, has a maintenance plan with budget been factored into this strategic rail network plan? Because the norm is 8%, and we see the degradation of all our infrastructure because there's no maintenance. So I'd just like to know whether it has been factored in. And then Honorable Bratiseth also spoke about the joy of the private sector involvement. What I would like to know is, what is the return on investment going to be for private stakeholders? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Bashop, for the question. Honorable Khai.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I'm also at Acacia Park, so maybe I should not take a risk of switching on my video. Let me also and the department. Chair, I think the Honorable Brother said there's a touch in many of the issues I wanted to raise. Whilst he is welcoming the participation of the private sector, I also welcome the third party participation, but there should be assurance, on the part of the committee that it doesn't necessarily mean that the public sector will be decimated. That this is a start of the wholesome privatization of the rail sector. That there should be assurance that a public sector will still play a role, a major role in the rail sector, because that will ensure that prices for commuters are affordable. Secondly, there won't be job losses. So for us, it would be to be assured around those particular two areas. So we will therefore be monitoring whether there is a decrease in terms of investment by the department, particularly around investment on the rolling stock, the locomotives in particular, but also the availability. Because if you look now, there's no availability of locomotives. I always raise this even when we meet with PRASA. This concern, particularly in the area where I come from in East London, where there's only one passenger train that is operating there. It's even operating very early in the morning. Most of the people can't access it. One could, with this policy, think that maybe this is a start towards where government is moving out of the rail system or the passenger train and leave it entirely to the third parties. That this is where the fear and concern that we're having, but also with the participation of the municipality, because the municipality are currently struggling. I think I'll also share the same sentiment as the Honorable Brother said as to whether there will be assistance available to the municipality, because not all municipalities are equally Honorable Chairperson. Yeah, basically, but the other issue, I think it's related to the point that he was also raising, that if I'm not mistaken, most of the lines with Transnet, but now how is the relationship going to be? Because when you develop a policy, but that is going to affect another department or another entity, how will that work? Or are these lines now, all of them going to be transferred under the Department of Transport? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Khai, Honorable Moshori.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Let me start to greet everyone this morning, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, my first question was covered by Honorable Boshoff on the issue of the maintenance. And my second question, Honorable Chairperson, I just want to check the introduction of competition for service rendered by PRASA. How is that envisaged? And how is that practically? Can the department elaborate? The last one, Honorable Chairperson, I just want to check. The person who was presenting is the acting director. I just want to check when he starts to act on this department and when the post is going to be filled, and what is the reason for the previous director in this department. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mashori. Just one from my side. In view of the assignment of transport in terms of the constitution to to the municipality, given the fact that there is more elaboration in terms of Part A of Schedule 4 of the Constitution, because it lists public transport as a functional area of concurrency. However, Part B reserves municipal public transport as a local government competency. The question that I want to pose, Chair, is how do we ensure that there is a seamless integration of this planning across all 3 years, to take into account that the delivery of an integrated public transport with commuter rail as its backbone is critical to this white paper. It becomes important to ensure that we are able to navigate around some of the challenges that were posed at local government level. But I think what is critical is appreciating the fact that Section 11(1) of the National Land Transport Act is also categorical in terms of the centrality of the municipal sphere to service level planning for passenger rail on a corridor network base. It becomes important that we also appreciate what is stated in terms of the National Land Transport Act around the role of the minister in terms of assigning the function of rail management to a city. It becomes important just to get a sense as to at the level of the first phase of implementation. It is important that we take the local government sphere on board, given the intervention that they have made with regard to the national land transport that was referred back to Parliament by the President. We need to learn some lessons from that process, so that this policy intervention takes into account the centrality of the local government sphere in relation to. I think the last one, Chair, relates to the point that was raised by Honorable Pratase, the short term, medium, and long term. I think key to us is how do we ensure that as a committee we are kept informed in terms of the project implementation plan in respect of the short-term priorities as outlined in the white paper, which will then allow us to be in a much more enlightened position to be able to appreciate progress that we are making. Because definitely from where we come from as provincial reps in this committee, I will be more interested to know about some of the branch lines that de facto just came to a halt. The DR railway line, I think is quite important that we are able to know in the immediate what will happen to those, because it used to be a very busy intersection as we were growing up. But with the grounding to a halt of that intersection, it also even affected the growth of the town. So therefore it becomes important that at least We appreciate the emphasis that the white paper is putting also in terms of the role of this intervention with regard to rural and township revitalization through the use of the intermodal collaboration. I think it's something that we appreciate, particularly with regard to the intervention that is envisaged by the paper with regard to areas where there is low transport numbers and topography makes investment into the introduction or revitalization of rail infrastructure quite a difficult task. So we appreciate the intermodal collaboration that is envisaged, particularly with regard to synchronizing the scheduling across transport providers, and also the issue of ability to purchase travel credit across various transport types into one ticket. This is quite important. But also construction of multimodal transfer infrastructure. This is quite important. So now the last question, Chair. The paper is silent on its sister department, like the public enterprise, which in most cases manages some of the SOEs that necessary at the level of the policy direction you are responsible for. Is there any reason as to why you are only referring to the SOEs and not to public enterprise, or is it envisaged that at some point the department will be taking over this SOEs? Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Makaipa.
Thank you, Chair. I see you are struggling with pronouncing my simple surname. It's Makaipia, Chair.
Oh, Makaipia.
Yes.
Oh, no. I was struggling as to whether is it Makaipa or Makaipia. But it's not a struggle. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Chair, let me thank the honorable members for the questions that have been raised, Chair, and I will deal with them in terms of the question that have been raised. Just starting with the first question from the honorable member is that the issue of the skills, especially the scarce skills, and how do we then attract it? I think it is a critical element that obviously one, like I mentioned in my presentation, that the program by Gibela and Prasa has been one of the good lessons, where what you then do is that where you know you don't have skills, because we have made sure that that is part of the contract. They were able to identify South Africans which they have trained, and they're continuously training in terms of manufacturing in the factory they're on board. So there is collaboration. I mean, for example, we know that there are other countries, especially in terms of countries, you know, when you go to Europe, commuter trains, that's where you'll find them, and then that's where you'll be able to have partnership with those. And secondly, if you go, for example, you want to deal with high speed, you then decide which are the countries that you want to work with. So at a government level, like we have made pronouncement on the skills development, that is going to be a joint effort between ourselves as the Department of Transport with higher education and other skills, so that obviously those skills are able to then classify as part of your skills, so that I think implementation becomes very clear. But I think I take cognizance of the issues raised by the honorable member, so that we look at that. With the issue of the private sector participation, I think it cuts across both Honorable Bishop and the honorable members, is that one, there has been serious very engagement with the private sector in terms of the implementation of the policy. We had what, firstly, prior to the policy being finalized, and secondly, after the launch, we then have an engagement with private sector themselves, especially those from the rail operators, the agriculture sector, the timber sector, and that. including Esomital and other operators. They've actually made pledges, both big operators and small operators in terms of emerging operators, both black and white, have made pledges of how much they want to implement. I think when we count, that is probably around 45 billion, where they're saying this is where we believe as that we can make a contribution. So that engagement has been there and is continuing. And as part of obviously engagement of implementation, we are working together with ARIA, which is the representative of the rail industry at a high level, to then say, how do we then make sure that we are working together to implement the rail policy? So there is that engagement, and I can confirm on that. Beyond the implementation with the private sector, we've actually been engaged banks. As part of that meeting we had Rand Merchant Bank, for example, coming in, says we think the policy is a step in the right direction. If these operators comes to us, here is how we work with them. Here is experience we work with in terms of other sectors, and we are willing to really fund that. So that really kind of engagement we have already continuously done. The issue of the municipalities, I think, is a very challenging one, whether they'll be funded. The policy really doesn't pronounce on that, because you will remember that a understanding is that when you own the asset, you then fund that particular asset, and the method of funding those assets, I think, differs in various aspects. And hence we are saying in terms of branch lines, where municipalities sees that element and of engagement, and we know in some of those municipalities that says we don't want to own this, they can be able to transfer that to another source of government in terms of dealing with those particular issues. The policy doesn't really pronounce on the consolidation of Department of Transport and DPE and those kind of things, because for us, we believe that it's a prerogative of the executive, but we have in the policy made sure that we really put issues that will make sure that we work together. And especially the last issue that has been mentioned by the first honorable member is then engagement between the Department of Transport and DPE. And even Chair, in your closing remarks, you are saying the policy doesn't pronounce on public enterprises. We might have not included it in the presentation, Chair, but if you look at the policy itself towards the end, we're talking about the role of those who implement, and then we have talked to the role of public enterprise, the role of DOT, and we're making a very profound announcement there, saying, at least for the first time now, Chair, when the Department of Public Enterprises finalize their shareholders agreement with Transnet, they must involve us so that we make sure that the policy implements that we pronounce on are then implemented as part of those. So it is there in the policy, Chair. Our apologies, maybe we didn't share that. So there's that implementation. Even on the issue of the branch lines, we've already actually engaged with Transnet on how do we then deal with that, so that it's very clear in terms of what we want to implement and what is the policy implement. Moving to the another issue raised by Honorable Boshoff on the implementation plan. You'll remember that ours, Honorable Member, is to provide a policy direction. The issue of maintenance, I agree with you, is very critical, but it is at an operational level by operators. But talking from the passenger rail point of view, we are, as the Department of Transport, engaging with PRASA. By the beginning of every financial year, as part of their grant condition, they submit a maintenance plan, which we are able to implement on how we move forward. The issue of return of investment to the private sector, I've made and pronounced that we need to make sure that it is on favorable terms. I mean, private sector will never invest really where they won't be able to have favorable terms. But there's various models, whether you do build, operate, and transfer, whether you do a concession model with the loading of private sector, providing so much percentage in terms of funding, government providing so much. But aligned to what Minister Honorable Raya said, is that public sector will continue to play a role in terms of especially the issues of infrastructure. And I said in my introduction that rail infrastructure is a strategic asset which we believe government must own. And that's the role where the public sector is going to continuously provide an investment. And we see the rail renaissance or the rail reform in terms of the policy going to increase jobs because of the investment that we are going to put, not to reduce jobs. But we are already engaging, Honorable Rai, with both Transnet and PRASA of then say, how do we have a bargaining council that cuts across in terms of the work and protecting the workers within the rail industry, obviously in a good and transparent way. The lines between Transnet and PRASA, how the issue of access, I have one of my colleagues, Ms. Mala Somaru, on the call that I'll, after finishing, allow her to just make sure that, and she'll even talk about the issues that have been raised by Honorable Mushodi on the issue of the competition of services offered by Transnet and PRASA, because it is really an issue of economic regulation on how we need to deal with that. In terms of Honorable Mushodi, in terms of when did I start acting as the acting Director General of the Department of Transport, just to put on record is that I've been in the Department of Transport for almost 17 years now as an official, and my substantive post, I'm the DDG responsible for rail transport, and I've started acting as the acting DG in June 2022. Honorable member will know that it is the prerogative of the executive to effect acting appointments. The minister appointed me that. And what happened is that we had an acting director general in the Department of Transport. His contract ended, and then he left the department. The post has since been advertised, and those that are in charge of filling it are running processes for us to be able to fill that particular post. Honorable Chair, reflecting on your issues, the issues that you have raised in terms of ensuring planning, the issues are really more about really implementation, and I think we take cognizance of those. But the policy itself talks about the issues around intermodal logistics, how this rail policy becomes a pillar, and how does it align towards the other modes of transport? Because for us, we don't want modes of transport to compete, but it's how do they complement each other, like you said, within the integrated transport system. And the issue that you have talked about, the role of minister assigning that, those are the issues that we are going to ventilate within the development of the devolution strategy, and the issue that we are silent on public enterprises, like I've clarified it, it is on the last part of the policy in how we then deal with that, and we then say what is the role of entities, what is the role of government, both DOT and the DPE. And on the issue of implementation, Chair, we are in your hands. The entities, like I said, they're implementing. I've mentioned that some of these short-term, medium interventions are part of our APP. Some were busy at conceptualization to be able to deal with that. At a project level, both PRASA and Transnet can be able to appraise on that, but at a strategy level, in terms of the work that we have done on the branch lines, how we've categorized them, which one do we see them as critical, Chair, and looking at the implementation of other elements, including the rail bill and the private participation framework, the high-speed rail framework, when they are already past cabinet, obviously processes, Chair, we're in your hands. You can summon us, we'll come and account and be able to then say, how far are we in terms of implementation, Chair. With your permission, Chair, can you allow me to hand over to Ms. Mala Somaru? You said, Chair, there was an input that was made on the chat. I was not able to see it. If Mala or one of the team members have seen it, they can be able to reflect to that, Chair. I'll hand over to Ms. Somaru to then take us through, Chair, on the issues of those competition of services and the issues that have been raised of how do we access each other line and what are the principles of economic regulation and our implementation. Ms. Somaru, can you be able to assist us?
Thank you, Acting DG. Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members for the opportunity to make the input. In terms of the rail policy, what we've done is we've basically at a high level set up the principles for economic regulation. So what we've stated is that we need to have independent and fair and transparent access to the network, which then basically has to be in line with the strategic objectives set out in the National Development Plan in terms of the investment that we're seeking in the rail network. This access needs to be non-discriminatory and it needs to be equitable. So what we've done is then we've said that a framework will be put in place for fair and transparent access to the network and associated terms and conditions, including penalties. And in promoting access for the private sector, what we want to do is facilitate efficiency in the transport facilities and services. And also at the same time, on the question that was raised on the private sector and the interest that they would show, what we have done there also is we said we need to promote the principle of user pay and cost recovery. But again, this needs to be fair and transparent. So we're going to make provisions for these costs to be benchmarked against international best practices and global best standards to make sure that the appropriate return or what is deemed appropriate is actually rewarded to infrastructure providers. And then the other issue that we've made provision for at a high level in the policy is that we've also said that the Transport Economic Regulator will look at complaints and investigate complaints, and also requests where we need to investigate whether the market is not functioning competitively. That will be done. So what we've started with is the interim rail economic regulatory capacity, which is basically the preparatory work that's been put in place. So we're taking an inquisitorial approach to the process that Transnet has advertised for the slot sales, specifically taking on board the concerns that the private sector have raised around transparency, etc. And then what we've done is to the build up to the Transport Economic Regulator, we will look at what framework needs to be put in place in the interim. The acting DG has mentioned the network statement. The network statement, for example, looks at what is the process to get access to the network. It also looks at the capacity of the network, sets up the pricing principles that will be applied, also how you would deal with dispute resolution, etc., the condition of the network, associated risks, etc., so that upfront an investor has an idea of what they're getting into. Simultaneously, what we've done is we've looked at capacity building for the economic regulator, and that's where we're partnering with, for example, the ports regulator and other institutions to build that capacity for economic regulation. So to bring in that safety that DPE and DOT are working together, there's an MOU that's signed between the two ministers. The work plan is basically approved by the Minister of Transport in concurrence with the Minister of Public Enterprises, and the work streams are being led by both departments. So that process of engagement is already in place. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Madam Chair. That's our response on the issues raised. Some of the issues, like I said, Chair, that we have raised is those that we'll need to make sure that in implementation we're able to deal with those issues. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Makapia, for that. Also, Mr. Rai is Mr. Hai. Mr. Hai is spelled R-A-Y, but it's pronounced as Mr. Hai. Thank you. I think we are comfortable as the committee in terms of the brief that we have received. I affirm that, informed by the absence of any follow-up questions. Let me then, on behalf of the select committee, take this opportunity to express our appreciation and gratitude to Mr. Makapia and the team, on behalf of the Minister, for taking the Select Committee on Transport into its confidence around progress that they are making around the white paper. So having said that, we will now allow the team to excuse the meeting so that we are then able to tighten the loose ends as part and parcel of our programs. Mr. Makapia, thank you.
Thanks, Chair and honorable members.
Thank you, Thandi. The minutes of the last meeting, Kipeda.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I will request Enrico to flight the minutes of start with this one. The meeting of the 31 of August.
Okay, that's the minutes, honorable members, where we were hosting the public service and administration on the implementation of the public service regulation across the public service to ensure uniformity and standardization of government administrative business process. Those are committee members that attended the meeting. Let's just check as to whether is there any member that has been omitted. I think members will indicate by raise your hand option. Let's move up. And that's the team from the support staff from the department and also from the parliament. The remarks made and the apologies that were recorded on that particular day. Those are the issues that were led by the Deputy Minister, and the observations, comments that were made by the members. Any reflection on that, members? Is it correctly captured? And then we finish by the consideration of the minutes of the 21st of August 2022. Any correction? Can I get a mover then for the adoption of the minutes of the?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Musodi, I move for adoption of the minutes. Thank you.
My honorable members. Honorable Musodi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I move for the adoption of the minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Musodi. Can we get a second? Can we get a second? The members are on the mute.
So I was not present in that meeting of the 31st.
Me too, Chair.
Okay,
I would
Sonia?
love to second, but I was not there.
Chair,
Okay.
it's
So,
Boshoff here. I will second the minutes as proposed.
thank you, Honorable Boshoff. The meeting of the 31st of August is truly adopted. Can we move to the second set of minutes? Enrico. This will be the minutes of the 20th of September 2022. It was a meeting, a training meeting, just to take the committee in confidence in terms of the bill that was referred back to the National Assembly by the President, the bill titled the National Land Transport Amendment Bill. These are the members that were present. Can you move up, Enrico? Okay. from our side. These are the members that were present. It was a very short meeting because the legislation is quite clear in terms of how we deal with this, with the returned bill. And that was an introduction made. Like as I said, the thrust was the conference by the committee or the select committee on the president's reservation in terms of joint rule 203 sub-rule 2. And the parliamentary legal advisor did indicate the thrust of the reservation, which mainly was on the constitutionality of the bill raised around clause 7, and the proposed amendment emanating from the committee was raised, and then the committee then was excused by the meeting when it dealt with the clause by clause deliberation.
Jay, sorry, we can't hear you.
I can't hear you, Chair. Maybe you should also switch off your, maybe you should switch off your video.
Check as well as in the absence of incorrect. Audible now. Is that better?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, it's better now with your video off.
Okay, great. Then can we get a mover for the adoption of the minutes of the 20th of September?
I move, Chair.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tim, for that, and thanks for that intervention, Honorable Khai. The minutes of the 20th are therefore duly adopted. Can we just table that? Are you ready for that revised process plan, Trubega?
Chairperson,
Not
I
yet.
think, yes. What we need to start with, Chairperson, is okay, Chair. What we need to start with, Chairperson, is to inform the members that the committee, there are 3 bills that has been transmitted for concurrence from the National Assembly to the National Council of Provinces. Those 3 bills are the expropriation bill from the Department of Public Works, and there are 2 bills from the Department of Transport, which are I just want to make it correct. Yeah, the National Road Traffic Amendment Bill and the Economic Region of Transport Bill. Those bills are section 76. So we met, Chairperson, to the management. I think, Chairperson, you can take the member through in terms of the outcome, how it is. We think we are going to deal with processing of these 3 bills. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trubega. I get a sense that you are not ready because that is the reason why I put you on the platform. But of course, the briefing by the transport on the national road transport, we will slot it on the 9th of November. Wednesday.
Chairperson.
Yes. Hello.
Maybe I can share the the proposed legislative program to the members.
That is exactly what I
Yes,
wanted.
yes, because what we have agreed, Chairperson, is that
Can you flight it?
yes, Chair, we are going to yes, Chair. Initially, Chair, we were gonna receive the briefings of these 3 legislation the month of November. But given the fact that these 3 bills, Chairperson, are more of a technical bills, so the proposal here is that the committee must first have workshop on those 3 bills. Then thereafter, then we start with the process of processing those bills. So the proposed planning, as you can see, Chairperson, we are saying, Chair, we will start the process next year in the first term of 2023. That's how it is. I mean, we've planned. We are saying, Chairperson, we'll have the workshop on the road. I mean, we'll have the workshop on the 2 transport bills, then the workshop on the expropriation bill. Then after that, we will receive the briefings by the department. Then after that, Chairperson, members as permanent delegates, they will go and brief their respective provinces. The planning is in the month of February. Then after that, Chairperson, then we will in the meantime work on the process of issuing adverts, for public comments. Hopefully, those adverts, at least they should be out by the end of the year, of this year. Then by next year, then at least we'll receive those submissions. Then we are saying we're gonna reconsider those submissions. The planning is around March. Then after considering the submissions, then well, the provinces also then I guess they will have to go. They will have to do their own, public participation processes. Then after that, then they will give us, the negotiating mandates, and yes, then we'll deal with the final mandates. So basically, Chairperson, that's how it is. The plan is. We didn't put the date now because we are waiting for the program committee to finalize the program for next year. Probably this week.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's quite critical. What was important was for the members to appreciate the process plan around how, as the committee, we are going to interact with these 3 bills. But we appreciate the fact that the date will still be finalized. But I think what is quite critical is for members to appreciate the fact that we have these 3 bills that are on the table. They are technical, and we are of the view that definitely there's a lot of work that we need to do, so that by the time we interact with the briefing, at least as a committee, we have more details around this. Just to get a sense from the members in terms of what has been presented, Honorable Tim Braxton.
Thank you, Honourable Moimang. Chairperson, can I ask that we just be sent this proposed check, so we can just get our diaries more or less sorted out. Obviously, it's not final, but it'd be nice if we have that, because obviously some of these bills, well, one of them is very contentious.
Brilliant. Let's agree. Let's agree on that. We will just probably await the tentative dates. So I suspect from next week we'll be able to receive the process plan with the definitive dates on it. No problem with that, Honorable Prataseth. Any further point on this? In the absence of any. Yes,
maybe before we finish this item, maybe we can allow Dr. Clark, just at least, to reflect on the planning in terms of the workshop on those bills. Just at least members at least have an understanding how at least we are going to plan for this workshop.
All right. Dr. Clark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Shlubeka. Chair, I think our starting point is going to be to engage with our sister committees to identify what is the key issues that has emanated from the previous considerations of the bill, and then draw on experts at universities or research institutions or think tanks, and identify persons who can come and address the committee and guide the committee through some of the issues we know might probably require a bit further reflection, and issues at which we know stakeholders might pick up on. We'll also, from a sister committees, be able to determine if there's any key stakeholders at this point already who we might consider as part of that workshop, engaging with the committee on the various or key aspects of the bills. So from our side, we will work on the programming, Chair, and then share that with the committee for inputs in the days leading up to the workshop. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks for that input. I guess we will let's hear from Tim. Tim Bratteseth.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. I don't know if I misheard, is it Dr. Clark? That she said that if we had input as to stakeholders that might be invited, we could give that input. If that's correct, where can we send that information? That's if the members would like to suggest people to address us. If I heard that correctly.
Yes. I think it's a matter that let's get a sense in terms of. I think Honorable Khai had a workshop yesterday. Let's try to get from him, from his expertise in terms of because it's workshop for members. It's workshop for members, and there will be an opportunity for public consultation. Let's just try to sort that out, Shlubeka and Clark, before I give over to Honorable Khai. Yes,
thank you, Chairperson. I think you have responded correctly, Chair.
Yes. Okay. I think for now this workshop for committee members. I know that Honorable Khai had a workshop yesterday. I don't know whether he wants to guide us in terms of the process that he followed. Honorable Khai?
No, thanks, Chair. No, we just dealt with the principal, Chair, and then I left it to the content advisor and the legal unit, as well as the procedural unit, with regard to the principle was that we get people from the university who deal with the copyright law, because we did not want to deal with the bills. We didn't want them to deal with the bills directly, their merits or demerits. We wanted just to focus on the law, the technical aspects of the law, on copyright and performance protection, just around that, so that those concepts and the context around the copyrights and the performance protection, we have appreciation and a better understanding, so that by the time we get the briefings, we are clear about the concepts and their meaning. So we just focus on the principle. So I was not really involved in then determining which professor or which doctor must come. They left it to the technical team, which is the content advisor, the researcher, the advocate Fanameva, who is now the head of acting head of legal services, and then the procedural unit. I think Shamara was part of it. So I didn't really say pick this professor, not that one. No, we didn't handle it that way. But then they came back and they said these are the professors. I didn't even know them. And then because it's also technical, we thought that also in terms of facilitation, we should leave it to the legal unit to facilitate it, as you saw yesterday. But it's continuing again next week on the 25th. But on the 25th, it will be the focus will be on the performance protection bill. Yeah, and then after that, then we'll receive the briefing on the two bills.
Thank you, Honorable High. Honorable Team, I think this guidance will be quite helpful to us. I suspect let's allow the team, the technical team, to give us guidance, so that we should not, from our side, suggest any stakeholder or any name. But over to you, team.
Chairperson, that's just what I wanted to get clarity on. I see no reason why a member of the committee could possibly suggest a stakeholder. If the stakeholder is declined, but Dr. Clark seemed to open that door, that if we had any suggestions, we could submit them of two persons that maybe are very knowledgeable. That's all I want to know. If we can make suggestions, it's just a suggestion.
Okay, good. No, let's close that window opened by Dr. Clark. Let's allow the team, the technical team, to give us guidance in terms of the best expertise that can make us appreciate the complexities of the issues that are involved around economic regulation, around transport, around expropriation, around property. I think that is quite key. That's what we want, and I want us to live at that level. Are you happy with that, Committee Secretary, in terms of guidance, and Dr. Clark?
Chairperson, we are very happy, Chair. We will sit at the team and develop a comprehensive program for the workshop. Thank you, Chair.
No, brilliant. Honorable members, let me then, on that note, take this opportunity to formally adjourn this meeting by also expressing on behalf of the committee an appreciation and also gratitude to all the participants in this meeting for making this meeting a success. The meeting stands adjourned. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Colleagues Tsepo and Dr. Clark and Enrico, let's remain a bit. Mado and your team, I don't think we should stream our discussion now.
Please remove YouTube streaming if they might not be listening. So I will just leave the meeting, but please remove them.
Okay, thank you.